Hello and welcome to what I'm hoping will become a series of videos on the Magic Online Pauper format. The deck I'm going to play today is a blue-black Mystical Teachings deck, which is largely of my own design. What stands out from this deck, as opposed to the more stock versions, is the fact that I'm running Brainstorm. Brainstorm is one of my favourite cards of all time, and the fact that it's a common just means it's something that I really need to be playing with in this format. I've decided to run Brainstorm because I've changed the mana base slightly from what the standard blue-black Teachings decks in this format run. Most of them are running the Ravnica Bounce Land, Dimir Aqueduct. But the format as it stands at present is incredibly hostile to these bounce lands due to the best deck in the format being the Esper Storm deck, which essentially generates advantage by using the Ravnica bounce lands combined with familiars from Planeshift and the Urza block untap spells like Frantic Search, Cloud of Fairies, etc. Uses these spells, generates ridiculous storm counts, and bounces all your permanents with temporal fissures, and then kills you with all the wee tiny beaters. As a result of this, most decks are now running, at least in the sideboard, some land destruction, and quite a lot of decks are now running at main deck. The blue-red counter post deck, for example, runs up to 7 main deck land destruction spells, and we really don't want to get caught on mana in the early game. So I've decided to run the 4 of Evolving Wilds and 4 of Terramorphic Expanse, which has enabled me to run a Brainstorm engine, which is incredibly powerful. Just to see 3 new cards and to shuffle away the 2 worst cards in your hand, you really can't go wrong. I'm running a 10 counter spells in the main deck here, which again is relatively standard. I've decided to go for a full set of counter spell, a full set of prohibits. Prohibit is a card that many people won't be too familiar with. It's one of the old invasion counter spells. 2 mana, counter a spell with converted mana cost 2 or less, and if you kick it for 2 extra, it counters a 4 or less. This card is innocuously powerful. I mean, so many people look at a card like that and think, well, why not Mana Leak? The fact is, in the Pauper format as it stands presently, everything is so much about jockeying for board position, and the format is more tempo oriented than say a format like Standard, where you can lean so heavily on a card like Stoneforge Mystic or Jace. And with this format being commons only, we just don't have those cards, so we're very much reliant on these tempo plays and just grinding out incremental advantages. Cards like Prohibit let us do that because people don't run too many spells at the top end of the curve. We can generally counter something really good that our opponent is wanting to really resolve without too much of a tempo loss to ourselves. The only real main thing that Prohibit can't counter that we would really want it to is something like, say, an evoked Muldrifter coming down on turn 3, or even later on in the game, an actual hard cast Muldrifter. Muldrifter is one of the best creatures. You'd be hard pushed to see a blue deck that doesn't run 4 of these. This guy is so powerful. He's just a testament to how powerful Lorwyn as a block was. I mean, looking at Scars of Mirrodin, what do we get in there for blue creatures? We get Sky Old School that loots, and in Lorwyn we got draw 2 cards and the ability to play it as a divination. It's crazy. Muldrifter being as good as it is, I've decided to run 2 probes in the deck. Again, Probe, it's an old invasion card, multicolored blue-black. You can pay this at any cost without being embarrassed. This is one of these cards that's incrementally better up the curve. If you cast it for 5, it's huge. You can cast it for 3, draw a couple of cards, get some lands, and be pretty happy about it. Obviously gets absolutely insane in the late game once you guys have traded resources for a few turns, and you know the board's at a kind of stalemate, and then you rip the probe, you refill your hand, and you empty theirs. It's such a powerful card. Removal wise, I've gone for a 4/4 Geth's Verdict and Doomblade split. Doomblade shouldn't really need too much of an explanation. Geth's Verdict, I've decided to run over Diabolic Edict. Possibly incorrectly. The Diabolic Edict obviously has a much easier casting cost than Geth's Verdict's double black. But as I said, the game's all about tempo, and getting any incidental life loss is pretty powerful. Just like playing something like Aven Riftwatcher is pretty good in this format, because again it's a body, it'll block, it'll gain you some life incidentally. You're not playing it for the life gain generally, you're playing it for the body. This again is a harder casting cost, but I think the trade-off is worth it. Like we run so many fetch lands, it's seldom difficult to get the double black when we need it. We're running 3 of Teachings. You don't really need to run 4 to still call it a Teachings deck. The games don't really necessitate you having a 4th Teachings in your deck. One of obviously one of the best things to do is when your opponent's not putting any pressure on you, just Teachings for Teachings, and you've got 1 in the yard, 1 in hand. This deck, you know, that's obviously it's a powerful play, but the game plan doesn't revolve around having Teachings in graveyard and hand at any point. Like the deck's solid enough without it. We run a few bullets for Teachings, in addition to the kind of standard counter spell and some card draw. We run a Grim Harvest, which is a card that you might not be familiar with. So essentially it's an instant speed raise dead with a recover cost. Looks like a fairly simple card, but is really in reality one of the hardest cards in Pauper to use effectively. The fact that we only run 6 creatures makes us quite vulnerable to removal spells. There are so many decks that run on so many removal spells, and we're not presenting them with any sort of targets for them. So you need to really time how you cast your Muldrifters in this deck, if you've already cast a Grim Harvest. The fact that you draw the extra cards is great, but you really want to have enough mana to either choose to recover the Grim Harvest or to counter something. And again, the decision about whether or not to let your Grim Harvest die and hold up counter mana is something that's really quite skill intensive in this deck. We run a Capsize, which is relatively ubiquitous in these decks. Can't really say enough about Capsize. It's a really solid late game card that just lets you clean up a lot. You can bounce lands for profit. You can go into land bouncing modes. The fact that we're not running the Dimir Aqueduct makes the possibility of bouncing a couple of lands a turn less likely, but it is still something that we can do. And the last bullet that I'm running is a Spire Monitor, card from the new set, which is purely here because it's a big creature. The 3 toughness is really relevant in a format that's defined by things like Muldrifter. It's bigger than everything else, kills nearly everything, and flies as well. It's evasive, which is really useful. The fact that it's got flash means we can fetch it with Mystical Teachings, which is obviously why it's here in the first place. We run a Twisted Abomination. Again, this has nice synergy with the Grim Harvest. We can search 2 swamps out of our deck and then play more carefully with our Muldrifters. Guy's also not an unreasonable body. Like the regeneration is really useful, and the fact that it's a black creature and dodges things like Doomblade and all the other black removal that says destroy target non-black creature is really a boon. In Pauper, being black and being a creature is definitely it's a good thing. And the regeneration is really tough for a lot of decks to get around. Um, Sadly, it's 3 toughness, so it is pretty lightning boltable. And the 6 drop, the fact that it's the 6 drop is again, this is something that generally will find its way to the graveyard in the early game to help you sort your mana, but it's definitely something that's going to be coming back. Also, again, helps with the brainstorm. It's another shuffler, which again is something that's really relevant in this deck. We really want to see new cards every turn, and again the brainstorm plus the shuffle engine of the evolving wilds and the terramorphic expanses really helps us do that. Moving on to the sideboard, should be relatively obvious what these cards are for. We have Duresses for control and combo matchups. Stripping a relevant card out of their hand is pretty good. We've got Spell Stutter Sprites, which come in against things like Mono Red Burn for countering the lightning bolts and sometimes just standing in the way of their guys. We have Echoing Truth as a bullet for the Storm decks, the Empty the Warrens Storm deck. They can spend their entire hand on an Empty the Warrens, and you just tap 2 mana and return them all to their hand. Card that has general uses, like you can bounce tokens, you can bounce multiple Mull Drifters and rebuy them later on. Just generally good card. We're running 4 of Choking Sands. This is our concession to the best deck in the format. Again, as I say, we're playing the tempo game here, and the fact that you deal them 2 damage with the destruction of their non-basic land is just gravy, in addition to actually killing it. Pretty good to destroy cloud posts, bounce lands, other non-basics that can cause us problems. We've got a Whale of the Nim. Again, this is a bullet. This is a card that you might not be too familiar with. This is here for the goblins and the hyper aggro matchups. There's a deck been popping up that's running Porcelain Legionnaires, other 1 toughness guys. Again, it is also really good against the goblin decks. You can set yourself up to get a 3 or 4 for 1 with this. Last sideboard card we have is a Hindering Touch. Basically a storm counter spell. This is purely for the storm matchup. So they generate a huge storm count by themselves and play either Empty the Warrens or Temporal Fissure, depending on what the deck is, and you can just pay this Hindering Touch and counter all their hard work, or at least that's the theory anyway. So that's the deck. I'm going to run it through a few 2-man queues, and we'll see how we get on, and hopefully I'll win some matches for you. I'm going to be running them as replays rather than live action. My computer isn't too great. It doesn't really like this recording software. It runs really slowly, so we're going to run it through the replays so that the impact's as minimal as possible, and we don't time out in any games or anything. Quite often the matches go pretty long with this deck, so we don't want to time out if we can possibly help it. That would be quite embarrassing to show you. So join me after the break, and we'll see how the first game goes. See you soon.